The rate of change is not going to slow down anytime soon. If anything, competition in most industries will probably speed up even more in the next few decades.
Challenge. The challenge is to attract all the layers, all the stakeholders into the system, because in payments we have multiple equilibria, we have path dependencies. It's not, that a system moves normally to an outcome which is the efficient one for society, but because of the network effects and the stability that network effects create, it's not obvious to bring in a new solution which may be better. And we believe into Nexus, we believe it's a good solution, but to bring it in, you have to create the network effects. And that may be even more complicated for a solution, which is a bit layered, where you have the FPSs, you have the payment services providers, and you have the consumers, and you all have to move them into this new solution, which is, has setup costs. So you have to have cost recovery. That's one of your principles also. So that is a challenge, I believe, to convince all those who have to participate that this works and will break even and is commercially also attractive.
This is one of the heads of the ECB talking about Project Nexus. You see, Project Nexus was an alternative payment system to connect real-time payment providers from different countries and interlink them together for frictionless cross-border payments. But if you listen closely to what he has to say, what he's saying is that it's going to actually have to make up in the cost. They're going to have to come up with money in order to move these banks from old payment systems to the new payment systems. There needs to be that much profitability to incentivize the banks to move over. So I don't know what world he's living in, but I don't think that a service should have to be that much money where it has to make sense for everybody to want to switch over for faster, cheaper payments when the crypto world is free to use.
And I believe it's possible, that's why we are believers into interlinking and multilateralism and Nexus, that there's definitely, if we reach this state where Nexus is heavily used, I have no doubts that it's commercially viable. But to move there in this network industry is a challenge, no? And for that, you have to engage with all the stakeholders, and you have to listen to them, listen to their commercial considerations, and then design the scheme, the financial compensation flows, the fees, in a way to attract them. And then you have to explain to them how the path to cost recovery or profitability or benefits looks like, to all convince them and then to move forward.
So he's not even sure if there is a path to profitability. He just says that. That means that the banks are going to have to charge fees to the customers that use the real-time cross-border payments. And at the end of the day, what we're witnessing with XRP, with Bitcoin, with all these different digital assets is markets are forming around them regardless. I mean, it doesn't matter if the banks get in or not. The people have spoken. The people have created markets, and anyone can tap into these markets to use for frictionless cross-border payments. You're already seeing this happen at scale with the XRP ledger. RippleNet is using XRP for this exact same use case, and it doesn't cost banks an arm and a leg to participate in RippleNet. Yeah, there may be some service provider fees, but I'm sure they're not having to make up for the amount it costs in order to join. And regardless if they join RippleNet, they could still use digital assets for free using different services by themselves.
ASEAN 5 has fast payments. The other ASEAN 5, some are starting to develop, others don't have. And it's expensive to build fast payment systems. So fast payment systems versus non-fast payment systems, how do we think about interoperability there? So that's the second. Third, digital assets and asset tokenization, right? While fast payment systems have definitely contributed to some transformation of the payments landscape, new technologies such as digital assets, asset tokenization, can represent the next paradigm shift. Today, fast payments are important because they already have broad adoption, right? So when you deploy the technology, people benefit straight away. Digital assets, asset tokenization, still nascent, hasn't seen broad adoption yet, right? But as it starts to gain traction and momentum and becomes more mainstream, then I think it's important to think about two things, right? Number one, between fast payments versus, DLT, shared ledger and asset tokenization, how to facilitate interoperability, which I think the Brazilians have done, right? And secondly, how to bring the whole concept of atomic settlement into fast payments, which can enhance efficiencies even further. So I think the future is going to look very exciting.
It will look exciting. And
So the banks are this far behind. He's actually saying that they need to think about interoperability between faster payments and digital assets because that's the next iteration. And he specifically mentions Brazil's faster payments with interoperability to digital assets and DLT. But I would argue, why would you need the faster payments to begin with? Just use digital asset rails. So the banks are this far behind that they don't even see the big picture unfolding. And it's very laughable to hear some of these things come out of these big banks. And this is the Bank of Japan. The other guy is the ECB. These are top of the food chain banks, and they're thinking this far behind.
When you have this global hunt for scarce capital, when you have to look at every dollar of the activity that you're doing and figure out how much capital are you going to allocate towards that activity, that's where innovations like blockchain technology, being able to be more capital efficient, being able to reduce the time, for example, that you've got your collateral locked up in settlement processes, being able to reduce settlement fails, being able to mitigate all of those different risks and become more efficient. Those are real dollars and cents that are adding up. And it's a truly massive opportunity. And so that's why I think it's important to look at institutional markets and to look at something. I mean, honestly, this is actually a pretty boring topic. Collateral management is not the kind of thing that gets people very excited. Many of these are sort of middle and back office type functions, but it's critically important to our financial markets. Obviously, having come from a bank that was the pipes and plumbing and is the pipes and plumbing of the entire world, it's something that we saw and all banks see as a massive opportunity.
The banks are still using terminology like wire. They're waiting 2 weeks to clear money. It takes several days for money that enters your accounts to clear. And this is really just antiquated technology, and nobody discusses how much wealth is really being tied up when you lock up wealth for 2 weeks, when the business does not have access to capital that it rightfully earned because the banks need to clear the capital to go into the person's account or the business's account. This cost of capital, it compounds. It's got an enormous stress that it adds to this entire economic engine. And what we're seeing with tokenization is less of a need for banks entirely and just move to the next phase of money. Ripple was early on to highlight that the cost of just cross-border payments is upwards $30 trillion yearly.
I'll take that. I think what you're doing, tokenizing, is so important because the current systems really are pretty broken, especially for the global community. Maybe not for Americans, but for people in the developing world, that don't have any access to finance. Tokenization is an incredible tool, and allowing people to buy, say, for example, treasuries anywhere on earth with a smartphone is just really amazing. And the thing that I think is so funny about how much better blockchain is than the old school alternatives is best described in the treasury market. So some of you might know you can buy treasuries directly from the government via Treasury Direct, and I used to do that a bunch. The government is so bureaucratic and so behind that it literally takes you a year to move your 90-day T-bill out of Treasury Direct to Merrill Lynch.
Multi-billion-dollar businesses, banks, small banks, little banks, large banks, they all invest their money in Treasury Direct for this yield, and the cost of capital is enormous. Imagine your money being locked up for over a year. This is why money markets, even though the treasuries are offering 4.5%, they're only offering 4% or 3.5% because they know that their money is going to be locked up for over a year. This is a tremendous amount of waste that is just embedded in the system. And what happens when companies like Ondo change treasuries for them to be instant cross-border? It was announced that Ondo is releasing their stablecoin on the XRP ledger as well as Stellar Lumens. Just think of all the countries that are subject to mass inflation, hyperinflation. As soon as stablecoins become legal, you're going to have a lot of these individuals want to use stablecoins as a medium of exchange.
They're so behind processing your payments that it takes an entire year to move it out. With Ondo or any tokenized thing, you just hit it on your smartphone and 10 seconds later, it's happened. Massive improvement over what we're doing. And so tokenization is huge, hugely important. And I would actually say, I think that's a big part of why President Trump changed to being pro-crypto. Stablecoins, which is, kind of a subset of tokenization, is putting our unsustainable, and I agree with Mike, totally unsustainable debt onto a smartphone and sending it to the furthest corners of the earth. And Trump is, a genius at things like this. He realized that's an amazingly good thing, is we're pumping out $2 trillion of debt. You need more buyers, right? Because the current, buying community is saturated. But if you can get, kids in Indonesia or whatever to be able to use a smartphone to buy a stablecoin, that helps fund the U.S. deficit. So I think tokenization is both hugely important in and of itself and big for why the current administration has flipped to being pro-crypto.
Yeah. BRICS nations are loading up on gold, pushing the price past all-time highs. And the reason for this is after Russia attacked the Ukraine, the U.S. government sanctioned Russia, froze the assets, and then sold their assets and gave it to their enemies. So a lot of countries are afraid of the U.S. dollar. They're leaning in towards gold, and the U.S. has to do something. And that something is to create a de facto CBDC, allow the private sector to rule the stablecoin world and have everybody on earth transacting in dollar euro stablecoins to strengthen the currency that is being eroded as we speak.
Since Dan and I have been selling Bitcoin since 2013, we've got a lot of similar stories because we share them. I used to be fascinated by the fact that there are more $100 bills in pillowcases overseas than there are $1 bills in circulation, right? Traditionally, people in regimes or in areas that were unstable wanted to store their wealth in $100 bills in pillowcases or, not a pillowcase under your mattress. And so shifting that and the genius of being able to tokenize a treasury, in essence, a stable coin that pays interest, is all these people who are barely making ends meet to start with are going to get that carry. Now, it costs the Fed, right? There's about $2 trillion in circulation at 4%. That's whatever, 80 billion a year. I think I did the math right. That the Fed is going to lose at one point if there's no cash, right? And if right now stable coins accrue to the issuer, that just can't last forever. It just makes no sense. And so I think you'll see that regime shift.
There was a CBDC scare, and what the markets are opting for is the private sector fulfill the role of a CBDC. But think about if a CBDC would have happened. You would have had the government watching a golden ledger and seeing where all money is moving to, how it's moving to. And this would have ended up in disaster, and not for the reasons why you may think so, not because of authoritarianism, but if you could successfully rid the world of crime, what would that world look like? I've listened to several economists debate this topic, and criminality is so intertwined that legitimate businesses rely on criminality without even realizing. And an economist, Philip Middleton, talked about just the organized crime in Italy. If you were to rid organized crime from the economics of Italy, it would cause a collapse. It was something of upwards of 25% of transactions are related to crime. But you see, there's still the argument of these centralized companies like Circle and Tether, and the yield is not getting passed on to the consumer. So we're going to see the next evolution of stable coins where whatever the treasury yield is, it gets passed on to the consumer. And that's what Ondo is trying to do, give the 4.5% to the stablecoin holder.
It's a great segue into the fact that a lot of the real world asset idea, a lot of what Web3 will look like is plumbing, and it's collateral management. It's not sexy. It's not as much narrative. It's actually plumbing. And, I laugh. I've been the CEO for a while. I'm a storyteller. Dan's a very good storyteller. At one point, he at least was an engineer at college. This industry is going to have a lot more engineers sitting in seats like this. And they're going to be talking to not necessarily investor groups, but industry groups of saying, how are we really going to rebuild this infrastructure to make it more efficient? Because what blockchain really will do is, think about trying to transfer a share in the Pantera venture fund, right? You got to go. It's paperwork. At one point, it should be tokenized, and I can sell my share or buy more because I like Dan so much. And so we're going to have a revolution in plumbing that hasn't happened yet, but is going to happen. And I think it might sound less sexy, but that's where we're going to be a lot of this things happens.
Novogratz, you may not like him, but he brings up a very important point, is that the financial plumbing of this entire world is being restructured on these crypto asset rails. And we're not talking about $1 trillion. You're not talking about $10 trillion. We're talking about quadrillions of dollars. Think about just the stock market. That's $30 trillion. And you pair derivatives, that's quadrillions of dollars. And you talk about real estate, that's quadrillions of dollars. All being tokenized, all being hosted on these crypto asset networks. We are watching a revolution occur in technology, but it's not just in technology. You see, there is a group of nations trying to fight for the old system, the gold system. They're trying to move away from dollars and start buying up gold. We're watching confidence being eroded in the dollar system, and then the dollar system being restructured on new rails. And we don't know quite what will happen, but at one point we'll see an exodus of all wealth being restructured into new systems.
Well, in 10 years,
It's a very short time.
Yeah, but you want to go live in 2027. That's in 2.5 years, no? Or 3 years. So then you have another 7 years to attract more currencies. If everything goes well, we hope to follow then relatively soon after 27. And then there are some more years for more currencies to join. So I hope you then have reached a critical mass that cost recovery takes place. And you are a global success.
Project Nexus is going to use different faster payment networks and tie them all together. So already, you're saying in 2 years, they're going to go live. And then 5 years, hopefully they have enough mass where it starts bringing down the costs and starts becoming a network effect. They've already failed. They've taken the ECB, they've taken the European citizens' money and just flushed it right down the drain. Are you kidding me? 7 years? 7 years just to even think about catching up to crypto? How backwards is this? And this is the banks. The banks aren't even governmental agencies. They're part of the private sector, and they got so big that the government pretty much just embedded themselves into this private sector. But what we're going to see is the big banks, small banks, medium-sized banks just partner up with crypto native solutions in order to tokenize all of the wealth. I argue that at one point we're going to see some type of competition between the banks and new DeFi type of banks and see if old brick and mortar banks go away of the dinosaurs. Some are so far behind in a race, they believe they're leading. By content like this, please consider joining my Patreon or my ghost site, dmjr.ghost.io. With these services, I offer a weekly chat where we discuss the markets and what's going on in the crypto world, as well as Discord access, Twitter access, research for the videos, ad-free videos, and much more. So be sure to check it out at patreon.com/fame21more or dmjr.ghost.io. Thanks.